Official mid-year estimates for 2023 put Scotland's population at 5,490,100, up more than 43,000 from the middle of 2022. The 0.8% increase is the biggest jump in 1 year since 1946-47. The main driver of the growth was people moving to Scotland from abroad and elsewhere in the UK. Without that, our population here would have fallen as deaths outnumbered births by the highest amount on record. We discussed what the figures tell us about the makeup of our society with the Professor of Economics, David Bell, who's part of the Centre for Population Change. Professor Bell, what particularly struck you from today's population figures?
Well, the main thing was the very large increase in Scotland's population. It increased by 43,000, 0.8%. That's the biggest increase that we've had this century, actually. It exceeds the increases that we experienced during the early part of the last decade when we had a lot of Eastern European migrants coming into Scotland. But the numbers between 22 and 23, the increase was even larger still.
And where were these migrants coming from, principally?
Well, so the migration was international migration outside the EU. So it was from countries like Nigeria, like India, like Philippines. That's the pattern for the UK as a whole, and it seems that it was probably replicated in Scotland. And so this is sort of unprecedented because in the past, we've had about roughly the same number of people coming from the rest of the UK as came from abroad. But in this case, the number coming from abroad has vastly increased relative to the numbers coming from the rest of the UK.
And what would be your explanation for that?
Well, there's a strong concentration in the cities. So Edinburgh increased by about 11,000, Glasgow by about 14,000, and Dundee has also seen quite a large increase. That may partly be due to a change in the way that they've been recording the number of students, but certainly there's a tendency anyway for migrants first to come towards our cities.
But why so much this time? Why are the figures, do you think, so large this time?
Well, partly it's because, the UK as a whole has had record in-migration. Last year, we thought that perhaps an end to record in-migration would come post-Brexit. But in fact, the overall net migration figures have increased. And that has come particularly from outside the EU, from those countries that I've already mentioned.
And this, of course, comes against the background of deaths having outnumbered the births by a record number this year.
Absolutely. So in terms of what we call the natural increase, there was no natural increase. We had 65,000 deaths, which is more deaths than we've had for 2 or 3 decades, and we had the lowest number ever of recorded births in Scotland. So in fact, the population in terms of the natural change declined by 19,000. And what happened was that the migration, particularly that in-migration from outside from out with the EU, has led to the fact that the population as a whole has increased.
And are you aware of any explanation why the specific figures in Scotland, deaths to births, is so significant, so large?
So there's a large cohort of older people, the so-called baby boomers at the moment. And so a fairly large number of them are dying. The number of births, it's just that women are having fewer children, and that's led to the fact that we had 45,000 or so births last year. Way back in the 60s, we were having more than 100,000 births each year.
You spoke about the areas that have increased their population, the cities principally. Any areas suffering depopulation?
So a lot of our rural areas actually suffered small declines in population. The Western Isles, Dumfries and Galloway, the borders, some of our more far-flung parts of the country suffered decline, partly because they do not benefit to the same extent from this international flow of migrants.
So what are the implications of all of this economically and demographically?
So, it makes the focus of the economy more on the cities than was previously the case. And because probably the population in the rural areas is aging faster, it makes them more dependent on public services and the need that's associated with that, more health needs, more social care needs, and so on.
And very briefly, any reason to believe that this pattern won't continue?
We may see some decline in the number of international migrants if the Labour government decide to clamp down further on, particularly on things like student migrants. It remains to be seen exactly what policy they're going to follow as far as migration is concerned. But other than that, it seems to me that the trends are likely to continue.
Professor Bell, thank you.